I can visualize this little girl Anuja, a 6 or 7 years old, all ears to the enchanting tales, natural, unnatural, supernatural, that perhaps her grandma narrated with such charismatic demeanor of mortal fabric, of gods, of goddesses, of beasts of prey, of beings gentle, women, and children, of Maya, of magic, of oceans, of chasms, of paradise, of abyss, the dark hell. This little girl, on tiptoes, sought to reach the saddle of the stallion as white as snow, promising miles and miles to go, with effortless ease utmost. Her grandma lifted her in arms, made her embark on the journey, the wondrous ride through kingdoms, capitals, cities, and towns. Kings majestic, not however without flaws, and queens adorned with gems and jewels, wavered at times, going with the flow. And the funniest of the clowns. Here there are no boundaries of time and space. She has been, since then, gliding through the vagaries of human mind, the corridors of celestial, intrigued by the masquerade called life. Good evening, friends. It is Maya, a poet, writer, motivational speaker, and a script writer, introducing Anuja Chandramouli, a sheer magician with words. Anuja is a best selling author and widely regarded as one of the finest writers in mythological fiction and fantasy. Anuja has written 11 books in all till date. Mohini the Enchantress is her latest masterpiece. Not only this, she is a trained Bharatnatyam dancer and a yoga enthusiast too. A very warm welcome, dear Anuja.
Hi, Maya. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. I think I can just listen to you all day. Such a pleasure to be here with you.
I just feel like you have been fed up on stories, nothing else. That's why you are such a wonderful storyteller, Anuja.
No, it's true. I love stories. I've grown up on a steady diet of stories, Maya, and I love the world of stories, and I like living in that world, So I like La La Land more than the real world, I think, much to my mom's horror. But I've always been closer to characters in stories than people in real life. I think I'm more comfortable in that world, and it's a magical space, like you said, an enchanted world of beautiful, gorgeous stories. And I love the stories. The stories are my life. It's that simple, actually. I think I feel most alive when I'm, writing a story or sharing a story, something like that. Really, really love them.
That's how you are such a wonderful narrator of stories. Anuja, all your books are the tales for Indian mythology. Let me frankly admit, I'm no fan of mythological books. So before going for the interview, I debated long within whether to go through the entire book on mythology. That was my first experience ever, to be comfortable as a host to you for the interview. But then I quashed my doubts and decided upon this journey with you to whatever realms you promised me to take to. And here is another candid confession. What a ride it has been! Almost surreal, poetic, and most delirium like. When I was back to my senses, having traversed with you to this land of wonders, I wasn't the old me anymore. It was a world of wonders, and as a reader, was it some chance, a happenstance, that urged you into mythological writings, or it was deliberately planned?
It wasn't deliberately planned, Maya. And first, I'm going to address that you said you didn't like mythology much. I'll start with that and then answer your question. I think it's I think it's really cool that you decided to give mythology a shot with Mohini, and I'm so pleased that you loved it. Your compliment has made my day, so thank you so much, Maya. You put it across so beautifully, and I'm so pleased that you genuinely liked it, especially since you're a self-confessed not exact mythology fanatic here. So I'm so happy to hear that. As to your question, you wanted to know whether I planned this or whether it just happened, and I guess the answer is it's been reading books has been like breathing for me. And it's always been a part of my life, reading and writing. It's like inhaling and exhaling. I started keeping a journal from when I was 12 or 13. So it wasn't anything which what you can call as literature or having literary merit. It was just stuff I used to scribble down, maybe quotes, little stories I'd read, little things I ate. There are so many pieces there about chocolate cake, I think. So, it's just little things I used to write down. And I never thought when I was trying to figure out a major for college, I didn't really think of English literature because, it was such a big part of my life. It wouldn't feel like a difference because I was always reading and writing. So, even the choice to start writing in this genre wasn't very deliberate. It just happened to me, I should say. The stories kind of made up their mind for me. So since I was reading all the time, I think, in these Archie comics, I used to read Archie comics as a kid. And Betty Cooper also wants to be a writer. And so there are a few stories where she also keeps a journal and where she also talks about becoming a journalist and author. And the advice she receives from her elder sister is she should write about the things she knows about, and for me, that would be mythology. Like you mentioned my grandmom, those stories I heard, those stories I imbibed all my life. And, India has such a rich tradition of storytelling, right? An oral tradition, which is why though so many cultures, so many civilizations have been destroyed by invaders, I think we are very privileged to have, to know that Indian mythology has survived, Indian culture, its traditions has survived because of that oral tradition of storytelling. We pass it on because we love it so much. We add a little bit to it, we subtract a little bit to it. It's a very organic, ongoing process, and it's been a part of our tradition for centuries. And I think I just wanted to be a part of that tradition in whatever way I could. That's all I was trying to do, actually. Whether it's written or whether it's storytelling with children, I just wanted to carry on the tradition of storytelling, I should say.
That's wonderful. Like, I love to imagine, was it actually your grandma or granddad who told you endless tales, thus molding this beautiful Anuja, absolutely punch drunk by past, the past people, not only with people, but gods as well, goddesses as well. So much so that you couldn't help fabricating this beautiful world of stories and magic afresh in your own mind and on paper.
So yeah, it was
Was
my
it your grandma or your grandpa?
my grandmother. But I used to discuss the finer points of mythology with my grandfather also. But my grandmother was the first one who told me the story of baby Krishna. And my mom used to have a painting, a beautiful painting of baby Krishna in our room. So, that painting, again, it's such a huge part of my memories, looking at it and feeling like baby Krishna is right there. And the gods and goddesses were more like friends. Krishna was a childhood imaginary buddy of mine. So, these characters feel like extremely, I should say gods and goddesses, they feel like intimate acquaintances. And my grandmom used to make me say the story, narrate the story of Krishna to her guests, her friends, whoever shows up at home, basically. So I would have told it over and over again. And I realized that I never stopped loving the process. It was always fun, to have an audience who applaud and listen to the stories, who love the stories as much as you do. So I really owe my grandmom big time for that. Unfortunately, she passed away before my first book was published. But her husband, my grandfather, was alive, and he was so proud. I remember he bought copies of my book. He came home and he was telling my mother-in-law, "See, this is my granddaughter's work." He told his friend, "My granddaughter has written this," and he made me sign it, and I was so happy that of my grandparents, at least one was there, and he was there only for. He died shortly after that. So I'm so grateful that one of them was there. I hope he stole my grandmom, that they've given me this beautiful legacy to take forward, and I'll always be very, very grateful to my grandmom and grandfather for the stories, for sitting so patiently and listening to me narrate stories which they already knew, which were the ones they told me. And my granddad, I used to argue with him about the existence of God and stuff like that, and he was very open-minded and very indulgent. And he was never patronizing. He'd take my questions seriously and he'd answer them. So, we used to have all these discussions, and now that they are gone, these memories are so precious. And I'm very, very grateful to both of them, to my grandparents. My dad's mom, my other grandmother, also used to tell stories. But hers used to be, they were also stories about gods, goddesses, little animals. So it's something that we don't have anymore. This generation, I don't think they listen to stories from their grandmothers. It's more from YouTube and the iPad. But in whatever way, I'm glad the stories are still a part of our lives. It's still a part of the cultural narrative.
See, I would add a little more thing to it. Even your grandma always feeling proud of you there, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What was your question?
You said your grandparent. It's not a question. I'm just adding a little thing to that. My own personal feeling that your grandparents are still there with you in that heavenly abode as well, and they do shower their blessings on you, and they feel proud of you, that you are a wonderful storyteller whom the world knows now. And that's fabulous.
Thanks so much, Maya. Actually, it's something I believe as well.
Why Mohini?
So why not Mohini? Why not?
Why Mohini? Why Mohini? Was it because I had to enter into mythology and start liking it? This fascinating character that made me carried away by its fascination and all that delirium sort of a mind people used to get in, just having a look of hers. So I started with a fascinating book. Was it just for this that Mohini happened? Why Mohini?
Why not? Why not? I'd like to think so, but that Mohini was meant to be, the story of Mohini was meant to be told, I guess, to resonate with a certain section of readers. But again, Mohini, I don't choose my characters, Maya, whether it's Shakti or Ganga or Kartikeya. I feel like these characters choose me, that they kind of, take root in my head. They capture my fancy, and they kind of seduce me into telling their story. I think that's how it works for me. Because my publishers and I, we usually talk about ideas, and Ganga was very, very intense, and I told them I'm going to take a break from mythology, but apparently mythology wasn't done with me, and I was practicing for my Arangetram last year, and one of the pieces was dedicated to Krishna. So maybe, I feel all these things are connected. Maybe while I was doing that piece, Mohini kind of like just popped into my head, and I thought it would be fascinating to explore a character like that. There was this bit where I'm supposed to hold the flute and stand, and my dance teacher was telling me, Anuja, you're supposed to be Krishna holding the flute. I don't want to see Mohini. And that's when I realized that she's in my head a lot, And even at a lit fest, it was at a lit fest, and I was talking to Anand Neelakantan and Kavita, my fellow mythology authors, Kavita Kane and Anand. And for some reason, it's just one of those coincidences. We were just talking about ideas for books, and both of them felt that Mohini would be the perfect fit for me. They said, there are so many South Indian legends connected with Mohini, which not many people are familiar with. maybe it's time her story was told, and the idea took root in my head. And I'm so glad it happened, because it's been such a wonderful journey, Maya. A lovely journey. It'll always be very special. It was just this wonderful experience to explore the world through Mohini's eyes. I really loved it.
Let me say why not Mohini. Anuja, I was set to thinking, as was Shakti, while arguing with Lord Shiva, as described in the book Mohini. What was, or rather is, this preoccupation with external beauty that the males of these species seem to have? It's truly pathetic and a complete product of patriarchy that women are oftentimes not acknowledged for who they are, but how do they look? And as soon as they learn to use them unworthy of respect. I would like to know your views upon the same.
No, I'm so glad you brought it up, because we have this amazingly complicated character like Mohini, Vishnu's only female avatar. And if you ask people to say what they know about Mohini, the only thing they talk about is how good looking she is, how her form was perfect, how her features were perfect, how she could seduce men. That's all people talk about when you mention Mohini. And of course, the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean. And it's like she used that weapon, which was beauty, her physical attributes, to win, to get what she wanted. And I think that's so limiting. And it doesn't begin and end with Mohini, of course. You have so many characters, so many queens, so many princesses. The only thing noteworthy about them, the only thing the poets can think to write about, the male poets can think to write about, is their looks. Their extremely, personal bias about how a woman ought to look. And it's been going on for generations, where women are valued on the basis of their beauty alone. Even today, we are supposed to be more enlightened. We consider ourselves more enlightened at any rate, and yet we are all enslaved to a certain idea of beauty. You have to be this color, you have to be this weight, you have to dress like this, you can't have frizzy hair, you need to have blow dried silky hair. It's so limiting. I don't know why we stopped looking at something called a beautiful complicated personality. A person's ideas, ambitions, aspirations, these define who you are. When you start obsessing only about the physical part of it, I think you lose so much when it comes to richness of character. And in all my books, I make it a point to delve into the depths of these characters, to show what they stood for. And I don't think anybody wants to be known as somebody who looks gorgeous, and that's it. And so I try to give I just try to make them real flesh and blood people, as opposed to these archetypes of beauty. That's all. I don't want the next generation. I have two daughters. I don't want them to fixate only on looking good. I want them to explore the world, try different things, have a wonderful personality, be more warm, friendly. And I don't want them to waste all their time on, of course, personal grooming is important, but I don't want that to be the only thing they care about.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do, I guess, in Mohini and all my books.
The internal qualities that one has, the potential one has, it has to come to a full flaring. And we waste a lot of time thinking of how do we look, how a certain way we need to present ourselves to people around. And this is how we lose that internal glow. And this is how people don't get to see what you are inside. Because whatever people are able to see on a superficial level is just your beautiful features and how you maintain yourself. So this is how I love the character of Kavya more than Mohini, and Mohini herself being so beautiful and out of the world. She herself confesses this, that she loves this simplicity about Kavya. And this is how I guess it should be. When questioned about whether or not it is problematic to treat mythology as historical fact, I came across a very bold statement from you somewhere that says that even treating history as history is wrong. Kindly elaborate.
Again, Maya, I spoke about the oral tradition which we have in India, right? I talked about storytelling, and kings used to hire scribes to write about their reigns, right? And these are the sources that have been passed down to us, whether it's mythology, which was again the mythological narratives were also, the narrative was controlled by a select group of people, those who hoarded education, who hoarded all these treasured texts. And historically, if you take the sources that have come down to us, these were scribes who were probably patronized by the rulers, who could hire them to change the narrative. You can't you try to flatter your patron because your bread and butter depends on it. And in the past, you write something libelous or scandalous, you may just lose your head. It was that kind of time. So as a when you read all these texts, when you do your research, you realize that there are so many contradictions. There's no consensus about about the facts, I should say, whether it's history or whether it's mythology. I've always found that people don't want to accept it, but whether it's mythology or whether it's history, it's the same. You have contradictory narratives from that same time period. If a little further research shows you where the bias stemmed from, there are entire holes in the narrative. Now, if you take history, you take a king, take somebody like Muhammad bin Tughlaq or Prithviraj Chauhan, and you find there's so little mention about the women in their lives, whether it's their queens, their mothers, about the roles they played. Their voices themselves have been silenced. They don't even have names of their wives, only, honorifics given to them. They're reduced to that. And even from that itself, that we have been given just given a small glimpse of what actually happened. It's very, very arrogant to say this is exactly what happened so many centuries, so many thousands of years ago. This is the original version. This is the only version. This is fact. When people use, that kind of terminology, I find they've lost me. Because as far as I'm concerned, the narrative is always shifting. It's always changing for various reasons. And you need to be a discerning reader. Whether it's history or whether it's mythology, you have to be open-minded. You have to accept the fact that you're trying to put the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together and there are whole pieces missing. Entire chunks of it is missing. So you try to plug it in using reasoning, maybe, poetic license, which we all use, including the scholars. You can't, otherwise, you're going to lose it entirely. What few pieces we have of this puzzle, they are precious. So, we try to recreate the picture as best as we can, which is why, I find it very, very tragic that we are killing each other over stories. They are stories. Let's accept that. We need to be sensible enough, open-minded enough to accept that, we are killing each other over stories. None of us know the truth. None of us know the proper facts. We don't. So don't trust people who tell you, I know what happened. I know what happened exactly with the gods and goddesses. So-and-so is, they've insulted our gods and goddesses. So-and-so has portrayed, this legendary king or a queen in a bad light. Let's go burn down their house. Let's chop off their nose. This is all, plain politics. It's, very, very sad that we have a history of adoring the stories and also killing for the stories. It's like, over a point, I'm going to be positive here and say we should learn to take the better, leave out the bitter aspects of it. But let's remember that these are stories, beloved stories, but it's very, very awful when we choose to get very emotional and ridiculous about these things. Whether it's history or mythology, I stand by my statement.
I endorse it. I absolutely agree, Anuja. I agree that history is not about truth or facts. It's about perspectives. And perspectives have to go on changing, right?
Yes.
Anuja, what's the basis of your research for these mythological tales? People assume it to be a cakewalk. And what does it actually take to go into making of such eloquently penned a book like Mohini is.
Like you said, people assume research is easy, that the books are all there. You just have to leaf through it and you're done. But let me tell you, I face two kinds of problems when it comes to doing research on these characters. Since I've chosen lesser known characters in mythology, there are, like I said, two problems. Sometimes I'm drowning under a torrent of information. Now, if you take Shakti, there's so much material, entire lifetimes aren't enough to wade through it. So the trick is to figure out what to leave and what to take. Yeah, and then you'll have some other characters like Kamadeva, Mohini, where there's very little information, very little information. And I'll have panicky moments when I think, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? There's so little. But the thing is, if you're persistent and it's a journey, you can't give up. You need to keep trying. You need to, there are characters who came into these characters' lives. So you can read up on these characters and, use the information to get more information. It's a lovely process, very, very difficult at times, very distracting at times. But, you learn so much, and there are so many surprises down this road. And, I enjoy the research process almost as much as the writing. And I do thorough work, because when it comes to mythology and history and stuff like that, it's nice to have a solid foundation of, I'm not going to use fact here. I'm going to say, let's have a solid foundation of information on which you can build upon. So I do that very thoroughly, and I love the process.
It's like sifting gold from dross, right?
Yes,
we have
exactly,
to take out
exactly.
the things that we need to polish and clean it up and bring it more beautiful than they actually might have been. And here comes the poetic license. Here comes the writer's license, that you can sprinkle your imagination and your aesthetic sense over facts which are bare like bones, and you make them beautifully creative pieces like you have done. Anuja, I feel replenished. While Mohini, herself being a paragon of beauty and elegance, finds the simple homely charms of Kavya very refreshing. Let me quote: not one to bother with silks and jewels or cosmetic aids, there was nevertheless something arresting about her vivacity and overall demeanor. Blunt and plain spoken, she knew her mind and she knew how to get exactly what she wanted to get out of life. How do you think can one learn this important lesson in acceptance? Even as mothers, we would like our daughters to learn this kind of acceptance, that if your complexion is dusky, if you are not a certain height, if you don't have those sharp features, you are still worthy of attention, because that the internal virtues that you might be gifted with have to come to full flowering. And this is where a parent comes to a positive role to play. So Mohini's herself saying this thing about Kavya's simple features is something that I see, that you see it as a spokesman of your own principle about beauty and external looks and internal value of a person.
See, actually, Kavya's character, she's kind of, symbolic of all the powerful women in my life. My mom, my grandmom, my aunts, these were, strong women, tough women, beautiful women. But they were so hardworking, so committed to looking after the home, raising the children, doing so. I've noticed that, these women pack in so much into 24 hours. They may not have a glamorous social media profile. Their resumes aren't exactly what you call enviable in today's world, but these women live such enriching, beautiful lives. Their contribution to society is, so undervalued. They work so hard to raise their children. They help so many people around the house also. If the maid has a problem, they help with their savings. They may cook and send food for sick people. They're there for each other. It's a sisterhood. And these are women who seldom have time to, go to the parlor and get their eyebrows done, get their hair done and look beautiful, create a nice Facebook profile. And we don't celebrate these women enough. these so-called plain good women. We don't celebrate them enough. We take them for granted because they are uncomplaining, quiet women. So we just take them for granted. And the only people, the women who are given a voice are your Priyanka Chopras, your Kangana Ranauts, your Twinkle Khannas. They are the ones who are considered celebrities, people who make a lot of money. I'm not knocking what they do. Priyanka and Kangana are inspiring women. They've achieved a lot. I'm not knocking them. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying it's gotten to a point where we celebrate only women who make a big splash on the international stage, who wear their gowns and who are always perfectly turned out. We don't pay attention to that woman, that harried woman who who lives an equally beautiful life, which deserves to be celebrated. We really need to start opening our eyes and looking around at everyone who makes a contribution to society, and we really should appreciate them more. Some jobs, like today when we have these online classes, you have teachers working so hard. It's such an important profession, but it's not a glamorous profession. They're not going to make as much as actors, cricket stars, and they are condemned to a life of drudgery, and it need not be like that. We really, a little appreciation can go a long way, and it's just something I feel we ought to do. And that's why I think Kavya came to symbolize those women, who are awesome, who are amazing. You don't really, they don't need anything else to, be more awesome, I would say.
That's so wonderfully explained, Anuja. I guess we have all these women in our kitchens working as mothers and sister-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and they are the actual goddesses because they have been shedding that sweat of their brows to make their children grow up fine and refined. And they are the ones who are working as gardeners. They have been planting these kids of theirs with utmost care and love and affection, and they have been laying by their own lives in order to have them fully grown up like tall trees, all prosperous and beautiful. So I guess we actually need to celebrate every woman, be her a mediocre beautiful woman, or she doesn't have a career or something, or she is not a name on social media or something, but they all do have their virtues. All that we need is the eye to see that. Those little acts of kindness go a long way, and they are the things that make you who you are. So every woman needs to be celebrated, and I was personally impressed by Kavya very much. Mohini is a fantasy. Does it actually change the narrative when it comes to a woman who writes a fantasy, Anuja?
I think I would say definitely. Because as I mentioned earlier, it was the men who were controlling the narrative because, only they had access to education. For generations, women weren't given access to education, and that was a big loss. And I think instead of dwelling on the injustice of it, I think we should be grateful for the fact that now education has become increasingly accessible to everyone. It wasn't only women who were denied education. Caste was a factor. People belonging to certain backgrounds were denied education. So it wasn't only women who were given the short end of the stick. And I'm so happy that is something which we work very hard to change. So it's important that these stories be told, with a voice that celebrates the feminine divine. And I definitely think a lot of male authors have also written wonderful books on the goddesses. So I won't limit it to a question of gender. It's a question of celebrating the feminine divine. That's all I would say. And I think men and women in recent times have taken that effort to reclaim voices that were lost, to bring stories that were that had fallen by the wayside to the spotlight. And there's been it's like a friend of mine, Raga, says, Raga De Silva, you've had her here earlier. I love what she says. She says you can change the narrative one story at a time. And I think that's really beautiful, and it's so important that we've started doing this, and I'm sure that future generations will have very inspiring role models thanks to the work these brave storytellers are doing.
Raga is a mutual friend and she is a person who can inspire many people around. Let me quote a few lines. Now they could lie beside their chosen paramour and caress her hair, massage her shapely shoulders and make her purr with satisfaction, nuzzle her neck while unwrapping the bodice, explore the length and breadth of the wondrous landscape of her body with an inquisitive index finger. And further, in what happens in the forest of cedars, Mohini's intense longings find a tantalizing vent. Now, why is it that a male is allowed to dip his wings in the fantasies, the sexual fantasies, and still come out to be respected by society? Whereas if a woman does it, she's considered to have stooped down the level of dignity if she does the same. Do you think it is true? Have you been, as a writer, taken into that light, having written a
See
fantasy?
again, when it's a question of women expressing their sexuality, it's always been a double-edged sword, because the notion that women who have embraced their sexuality have been treated as fallen women, I think that concept itself is not entirely true. The thing is, given that female sexuality is so potent, the texts say that women enjoy sexuality on a more emotional as well as physical plane, and therefore the ecstasy they experience is more profound than the male of the species. And it's probably because of this added dimension which women have in their relationship with sex and sexuality, that makes it so potent. And hence it's always been a double-edged sword, and only few women have mastered the art of wielding this weapon, I should say. Throughout history, over the centuries, there have been many women who've successfully used this tool because they're confident, because they don't second guess their choices. And women like that are hard to judge because they do not judge themselves. On the other hand, you have women who are raised to be, the goddess, not the whore. There's a certain schism which crept up over the years, and women start doubting themselves. They feel that, okay, I've got to be, the lady. I can't be the tramp. So, when that self-doubt creeps in, I think, society mirrors your doubt. And for the longest time, it's been that way. For a majority of women, it's been a battle to have a healthy relationship with their sexual yearnings. Whereas men, on the other hand, are celebrated as studs, But that again is not true. There are consequences when you indulge your sexual appetite. It's like when you indulge any appetite too much, there will be consequences. So for men and women, it is a slippery slope to be on, and you need a certain self-belief, self-confidence, a healthy attitude towards sexuality to emerge relatively unscathed from it. Otherwise, it's a learning experience. You could have some unpleasant experiences, but the important thing is to learn from it. So again, in my stories, I try to strike that balance where you don't indulge your desires too much and you don't suppress them either. Because either way, it could have consequences which you aren't prepared for. So, as with anything else in life, I think you need to just walk tread that middle path, find that a certain sense of balance, and not apologize for your choices. But at the same time, you should commit to making choices that work for you, whether they are conventional or not.
Beautifully said. I love the character portrayal of Kavya, who entertains no faulty notion of perfection, who would find a way to be happy and productive even in the teeth of most difficult times. Her clarity on the masquerade males indulge in impressed me a lot personally. I would quote, Kavya had hated the elaborate masquerade and was known to comment that men who tried to protect a woman's so called virtue were nearly as bad, as twice and irksome as those who sought to assail it. Anusuya and Tara are also very strong characters. Portraying them the way they are portrayed, is it supposed to be a retaliation against society?
Definitely, definitely. I'm so sick of, a society where women are either worshipped on a pedestal, all these women we are taught to admire growing up, characters like Anushya, all of them, they considered the perfect wife. And what does the perfect wife mean? I remember for one of our dance dramas, I played Thiruvalluvar's wife, and I was so annoyed at that character. I was arguing with my guru. See, of course, this was written in another age, but still, all these wives, they consider their husbands' every wish, their duty, something they have to fulfill. Your husband demands a meal in the middle of the night, you go running, you wash his feet. It's so servile, and women, that kind of wifely virtue is celebrated. You're placed on a pedestal, and I think all of us know that when your husband comes and bugs you for a midnight snack, you're not going to smile and say your wishes. My command, you're going to snap at your husband. I think we all know that, and we shouldn't feel guilty about it. It's ridiculous that such this servile wife is placed on a pedestal, and anyone who rebels, who's headstrong, you're kind of branded a whore and dragged down. You're lynched by the mob. And it's something that we see even today, this witch hunt, Sometimes stories do have far-reaching consequences. So if you can't, measure up to these impossible standards, no woman can. And we shouldn't try to be this impossible ideal of virtue, which some guy with mommy issues wrote about centuries ago. And see, I think we are seeing these witch hunts even now. I'm not going to add names and, add fuel to the fire. But it's like that, as a girlfriend, as a wife, people have ridiculous expectations from the female of the species, whereas men are always given a pass. And, that's just silly. That's just not something we should encourage or put up with. Not that I'm knocking women who wish to, do certain things, who want to. Some women like caring for their husband and children. That's fine. It should come down to choice. It should come down to what satisfies you, what fulfills you. And if your career, if your selfish desires give you satisfaction, then go for it. We should learn to make peace with each other's choices, and we need to stop judging, because I genuinely think all of us are extremely flawed human beings. There are no exceptions to that rule, in my opinion. I think we are all flawed. If somebody were to train a microscope over our existence, they're going to find a lot of dirt there. The news channels will be very happy with the information they find if they were to train a microscope on our lives. And it applies to everybody. If people look for dirt, they're going to find it. So we are not in a position to sit in judgment of others, to call for the punishment of others just because, they've done something that's pissed us off. It's a ridiculous narrative, and I really wish we would push back against it and say, no, I do not have the right to judge others. That I'm not going to encourage myself to do it, and I'm not going to join the mob and do it. It's really pathetic, the way a woman is either a goddess or a slut. Please, every woman, I think by now we are wise enough to acknowledge that every woman is part goddess and part whore, and there's no shame in that. That is what it is. It is the truth. And it's the same for men also. Part beast, part god. That's just our composition. Both sides, are present in every human being. And we need not sit on our high horses and pretend that we are the embodiments of virtue. And everyone else, is some sort of a vice-riddled villain, and we need to punish them. Really, we need to stop doing that. Stop viewing the world with a black and white lens, I should say. So again, in my book, you have these shades of grays, and I hope people will acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's not always black or white. There are gray shades as well. And we all are composers of many shades. And every shade has to be celebrated. Why do we need to feel humiliated over some and be glorified over the others? Anuja, Mohini's character invested with superpowers that she has, is somehow reminiscent of Tiresias, the connecting thread in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, a character famous in mythology as an exceedingly wise being with knowledge of the future. Both Tiresias and Mohini serve as narrators in the books. Tiresias lives across two sexes too, is gifted with farsightedness, and can float through space like Mohini. Several LGBTQ characters in Indian mythology, fallen by the wayside, have been brought back into the mainstream consciousness by you. Do you mind throwing some light over here? And in the meantime, I would invite audience to ask some questions to Anuja if they feel like. We'll pick a few.
Yeah, so Tiresias is one of my, it's a very, very interesting character. I love Greek mythology, and I love the parallels between Greek and Roman mythology and our own. And you mentioned that Tiresias, changed genders, and he was actually cursed, by some versions say Athena and some versions say Hera. So in Athena's case, he viewed the goddess naked, and therefore he was condemned to change genders and become a female. A similar version of the story would be Ela's story from Indian mythology. He's one of the ancestors of the Pandavas, and again, he's said to have witnessed Shiva and Parvati make love. And therefore, he was he changed genders. He became a woman, and later he got a boon where he'd spend half his time as a man and half his time as a woman. So that's a parallel. And then I think Tiresias and Hera's Hera, I guess. In that version of the story. He sees two. I think he's asked to intervene in a marital dispute between Jupiter and Hera, and he takes Jupiter's part, and hence he gets condemned again. So it's like I love that the ancients had the wisdom to acknowledge that gender is something fluid. Again, this is not something which we should translate verbatim and say that this was a curse, this was a boon, this was a miracle, a magical act of transformation. Actually, this was what mythology is actually a way of holding a mirror to. Mythology is a way of holding a mirror to the harsh realities of the human condition. So it's like very interesting that way. And again, it's a way of acknowledging that there were those who did not fit into a binary notion of gender, that there were those who explored their sexuality in different ways, who had different sexual preferences. And the whole point is that gender is a fluid concept, that it's always evolving, always shifting. In modern times, because of our obsession with the spirit of scientific inquiry, which is not a bad thing, it's just that we'd like to, name and tag something and put it away into a little box. Whereas, our identities, whether it's our sexual identity or otherwise, it oftentimes it defies this labeling process because it's complicated. It can keep changing, and we can't say, okay, she's lesbian, she's gay, this is that, transgender, and kind of like try to figure out what to do. These don't fit into our notion of the binary concept of gender, which is why it leads to problems. These are complicated things which we try to simplify. Again, the key is to remember that these stories are there in mythology. The ancients acknowledged that there was limits to their understanding of the human condition. They were only trying to understand. So we should also do the same. Try to understand, keep an open mind, and just embrace diversity. Diversity is a beautiful thing. We don't have to all have the same ideas, the same thoughts, the same ideas. That's what makes the human race so exciting.
Anuja, I came across an interesting observation during my research on your work, the beautiful incident that urged you to write the story of Kartikeya. I would love you to share it with the audience as well. I was enamored over it when I got to hear this thing.
Thanks so much, Maya. I mean, you've done your research so thoroughly. I wasn't prepared for this question, but I love sharing the story. So basically, a few years back, about 4-5 years back, was shortly after I'd rejoined dance class, but I'd started taking Bharatanatyam classes again. And my guru thought I was ready to do a solo. I didn't think I was ready, but she wanted me to do a piece called Shanmuga Kautuvam. It's a piece dedicated to Kartikeya. Yeah, a devotional piece. And I was like, I love this piece. It was again a wonderful experience to dance to this piece. And I was, recording the music on my phone at home. I'm not very tech savvy. So I just played the tune on the computer and I'm recording it on my phone just to have it with me, just so I could listen to it over and over and just absorb those words, no? So I was recording it. And while I was recording it, I was in my mother-in-law's house. We used to live together at the time. And there'll be lots of peacocks there. It's quite common. It's an old house, so you'll see peacocks. My kids used to feed the peacocks and all. And suddenly, while I'm recording, these peacocks started screaming. And I was thinking, shut up, peacock, I need to record. But I continued recording. And after it was over, I just stepped out. I just looked out the window, and you could see the terrace, you could see the garage, you could see the grounds below. And as far as the eye could see, there were peacocks. So it's true that, peacocks usually show up in that house, but not like this, as far as the eye could see, there were peacocks there. And that's when it struck me, the peacock is Kartikeya's Vahana. And suddenly there are peacocks and they were just standing there in silence and, I'm having goose flesh and suddenly, and in a few moments they just melted away. Suddenly it was all quiet again. And I replayed that piece and they had been, singing, they weren't screaming. Just one portion, just a portion before the Sharanam, which is the final crescendo. Just before that final paragraph, there'll be a small bit, where you build up that crescendo to that crescendo. And it was just at that point where they were singing. And it was like something so beautiful to think, how all these things are connected. And I felt so... I'm not really that religious, actually. I wasn't at that time. And, it just blew my mind. And it's just this lovely memory that stayed in my head that, there was this, I don't know, it was just too special for words, I should say. I've never really forgotten that experience. I don't think I will. And thanks so much for letting me share it with you again.
Yeah, that's how I was carried away by the description. So beautiful. And it all depends on a faith, how we take things, symbols of certain moments. It was a beautiful incident you described, and I just loved it. It felt like sharing it with people around. Anuja, being a dancer, you are obliged to perform on stage. And elsewhere, you said you are an introvert. You have 2 daughters, you have a pet, and now I got to know you have 2. There are 2 dogs. And the entire household to run. Above all, such intellectual output. And how do you manage all these things? Like a juggler. Does it ring any bell?
Juggling is the perfect
term. How do you manage all these things so beautifully together?
I don't think I manage beautifully, actually. I think I get very tensed and at times I worry a lot. But, I also do yoga. My mom insists I do yoga because I tend to get so tensed and worked up all the time. So I think yoga helps to just slow things down. And, sometimes I just tell myself, you'll figure it out. Don't worry. It seems overwhelming. But 24 hours in a day is actually enough to do everything you want to. You'll figure it out. You will. So, there's that voice in my head.
There are times when I feel like everything has got into a mess, but then you realize yoga helps you meditate and think about things low level, and you get things sorted out well back again in time. So this was just a proof of things like those that often go wrong. So there's nothing wrong about it. This is life, how it goes on. Welcome back.
Exactly. So I'm so glad to be back. And I'm sorry about all these technical glitches, and I can't find my daughter who kind of fixes it for me. So to answer your question, as I was saying, I get very stressed out But over the years, I've learned to believe in myself, I guess, and just say that it'll work out. I'll somehow figure it out, even if it seems crazy. But let me say, it's fun to be a juggler. It seems like very difficult, but when you can pull it off, there's this amazing sense of satisfaction, and that makes it totally worthwhile. Just on a very personal
Agreed.
level, people may not know, people may not give you awards for it, you may not be richly compensated, but at the end of it, you get that satisfaction of knowing that you've pulled off something, and that's worth it.
Yeah, it actually does. Anuja, your prose is at times utmost poetic, as I told you over phone as well. It's lucid, it's effervescent, and why have you not tried your hand at poetry or something like that? You must go for it, I guess.
Poet, I will leave the poetry to you. I don't think I'm very good at poetry. Because for the
See,
longest
even
time,
your
I used
prose
to
is
have difficulty
poetic.
understanding poetry.
I can't believe that. And
No,
even
it's
your
true. For the
prose seems
longest
to be
time,
like poetry.
no, it's very sweet of you to say
See, this is
that.
how I fell
But
in love with Mohini. This is how I fell in love with Mohini. Because it was so verse like. I was most in my own element while reading it. So you must try your hand at poetry as well.
I definitely will, but I'm sure it'll be awful. But thanks so much for saying that. I think I'm more interested in poetry now. Only now have I, in the past 10 years or so, I've started appreciating poetry and reading verse. In school, I used to complain a lot when we had the poetry part of it, when we had to memorize poetry. And I'll say, prose makes sense. Poetry is just so much ostentation. It took me a long time to appreciate it. And I think my teachers will be happy to hear you say that my prose is poetic. And it's seriously such a sweet thing to say from
It
such an
indeed is.
amazing poet like you. So
It
but I think
indeed
I really
is.
should leave the poetry to the experts like Maya and stick to prose.
No, no, you should not stick to any branch of studies because you are versatile and you should try different things. Anuja, what message would you like to give to our audience and especially women who have great potential, but somehow at the altar of conjugal bliss, they sacrifice their fully flourished careers, their own interests that they were good at? And they don't feel like this one lifetime is sufficient enough for them to have all those things fertilized. They have forgotten it on the way of pleasing everybody, and they take themselves to be the last on the list of priorities. What do you have to say to these fellow women of us in the name of sisterhood?
I think the audio is a little weird. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So I
I
think
can
my
hear you, Anuja.
message to all the women out there, women, men, whoever, like I said, try juggling. Don't be afraid. Don't think, okay, I may not be able to do it. I may not be able to handle it. You'll never know what you're capable of unless you try. So don't be afraid to fail. I've fallen on my butt many, 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 many times. It's okay. It's okay. It's a funny story you can tell later. It's okay. Everything's a story. So, don't be afraid to take the plunge. Don't be afraid to lose. It's just the journey. There are so many things we can do. Life offers us so many chances. We just need to stop being afraid. So just follow your dreams wherever they go, even if they sound crazy and ridiculous. Just go for it. Go for broke. We have only one life, right? That we know of. Thanks so much,
Latha,
Maya, for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
let's see a few comments, Anuja. Latha is giving beautiful comments one after the other. Let me pick a few. What is life without a tinge of gray in it? Exactly. This is how we discussed. And the other one, listening to you not being very confident about writing poetry and leaving it all together on me as a poet. Latha promises me on your behalf, Maya, don't you worry, you will be discussing poetry next time with Anuja because she is a go getter. See, there are people who can swear on you. Mr. Krishna Kumar says so as mythological characters wielded significant empowerment, but particularly living in ashrams with sages. Social empowerment after witnessing lowest ever status in mid this renaissance. Are you able to see this question? Are you able to see the questions? Anuja seems to have been disconnected again. She'll be back in a while. There she is.
Yeah, I can
Anuja,
hear
am I
you.
audible?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Are you able to see the comments over there on the screen?
No, I'm sorry, I can't see the comments. Could you read it out to me, please? Oh, yes, I can see some of the comments.
To you, this is by Mr. Krishna Kumar. Can you see the one I was
Okay.
reading by Mr. Krishna Kumar?
Wait,
Shall I read it
I
out
can
for
see
you?
it, I think. So many women depicted as mythological characters wielded significant empowerment, particularly living in ashrams with sages. Gradually, the position of women in today's society has gained substantial empowerment after witnessing lowest ever status in medieval period. Will you, Anuja, reveal the reasons that have brought this renaissance? No, again, to answer this question, this whole thing that women wielded significant power at one stage and later they didn't, again, it's a misleading narrative because at various points there've always been a section of women who've been powerful. Their stories may have been lost, but the thing is, where this thing you mentioned, the medieval period, whatever it is, there were a section of women who cannot be it's always true, some women just cannot be held back, and they are strong, they are powerful, they own it. So it's always a question of getting more women to embrace this the powerful side of them. And society may be supportive at some points, may not be supportive at other points, but that's always beside the point. The point is that at their core, all women have this source of power, this Shakti within them. And, all they have to do is embrace it for themselves without worrying about societal censure or approval. That's what I would say. I hope that answers your question.
Of course it does. Anuja, count me in as one of your fans for you absolutely right, beautiful. And a huge thanks from my side and on behalf of my audience as well for you to have been here this evening. Thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks so much, guys.